Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm the Texas Coastal Outreach Coordinator for American Bird Conservancy.
And I'm Celeste. I'm the Education and Outreach Manager at Gulf Coast Bird Observatory.
For years, our organizations have worked to protect the birds and their habitats along the upper Texas coast. Through that work, we've unfortunately seen the impacts that trash pollution in our coastal environment can have on birds and other wildlife. From entanglement in fishing line to ingestion of plastics, trash poses a serious threat to native wildlife. Based on data collected by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Ocean Conservancy, Texas is one of the most polluted states in the nation in terms of trash debris.
So in 2020, we formed SPLASH, or Stopping Plastics and Litter Along Shorelines. SPLASH is working to create a cleaner environment for people, birds, and other wildlife in the greater Houston-Galveston region through community science, education, and outreach.
We host monthly cleanups where, with the help of volunteers, we remove trash from our coasts and waterways, while also collecting data on that trash. By collecting this data, we can figure out what types of trash are most prevalent and what areas may be trash hotspots. This information will help us understand how we can more effectively manage trash and target public education initiatives.
We are also working to bring SPLASH to classrooms and schools throughout our region because it's so important for future generations to understand the issue of trash pollution and marine debris and why we need to keep our environment as clean as possible for wildlife and people. So the curriculum we've developed introduces students to the concepts of trash pollution and marine debris, how this issue is connected to our entire watershed, our local ecosystems and wildlife, and solutions to the challenge that students can use to develop their own projects or tackle this challenge in their own communities. So we'd love to work with you and your classes through either classroom sessions or field trips with our team, or by passing our knowledge on to you so you can bring the SPLASH mission into the classroom yourself. So let's give you a quick introduction to some of the information we cover in our curriculum, and then hopefully we'll work with you in the future. First, let's make sure we know what marine debris is. So marine debris is defined as any solid, long-lasting, man-made material that has been abandoned intentionally or accidentally in the marine environment. This includes plastics, glass, metals, abandoned fishing gear, shipwrecks, and more. Pretty much anything that is man-made and has been abandoned in the marine environment. And you'll notice that the definition specifically says in the marine environment. So what about trash you see on our roadways or in freshwater bayous inland from the coast? Well, although that trash might not be marine debris yet, it may likely become marine debris. When you think about trash on our coasts and in the ocean, you may think that it's come from people littering directly on the beach. And while that does happen, unfortunately, it's not always the case with marine debris. A lot of the debris that we find in the ocean originated from somewhere else in the watershed, and in our case, the Galveston Bay watershed. And the Galveston Bay watershed covers an area so large, it extends north of Dallas and includes half of the entire population of Texas. So, for example, since Dallas is included in the Galveston Bay watershed, their water and all of the trash it contains flows to the Galveston Bay and potentially even into the Gulf of Mexico through gutters, streams, rivers, bayous, etc. So even distant landlocked communities are connected to our coastal environments because of watersheds. Not only can we get marine debris from farther inland, we can get it from all across the world as well. Ocean currents and gyres transport water and all of the trash in it all across the globe. And because of specific currents that flow through the Gulf of Mexico, the Texas coast happens to be a marine debris hotspot. So marine debris accumulates on the Texas coast at a rate 10 times faster than the rate that it accumulates on the shorelines of other Gulf states. So we have a big challenge to tackle here in Texas. Now let's talk a little about the impact of trash pollution and marine debris on humans, ecosystems, and wildlife. No marine debris is good, but some marine debris is more problematic than others because of how long it persists in our environment, and plastic is definitely the worst. When plastic enters our environment, and particularly the ocean, it will degrade over time, breaking into smaller and smaller pieces because of the waves, the sun, and other mechanisms. However, plastic does not actually biodegrade, meaning it never fully decomposes. This means that nearly every piece of plastic that has ever been made is still on our planet in some form or another. Over the years, sometimes even hundreds of years, these plastics may break down into units so small that we can't actually see them with the naked eye, but they're still there. So plastic pieces that are less than 5 millimeters in length, about the size of a grain of rice, are called microplastics. Microplastics are a huge problem because they are easily mistaken for food by marine life. They often contain or carry toxins. They're difficult to clean up from the environment because they're so small. And unfortunately, they are everywhere. One study showed that as much as 90% of the table salt sold globally contains microplastics, and researchers are even finding microplastics in some of the most remote places on Earth, from the depths of the ocean to the peaks of the Himalayas. Plastic waste in the environment, whether in the form of microplastics or larger plastics called macroplastics, pose an enormous problem for wildlife. It can damage their habitat and can physically harm them through ingestion or entanglement. When an animal becomes entangled in plastic, it can be extremely difficult for the animal to move, which means it may not be able to hunt and it might be vulnerable to predators. The entanglement can also cause injury to the animal that could get infected or permanently maim the animal. When an animal ingests plastic, it can damage the animal's internal organs or collect in its stomach, causing the animal to feel full, which leads to malnutrition because the animal thinks it doesn't need to eat. Scientists are also learning more about the toxins that can accumulate on plastic debris in the environment, as well as toxins that plastics may produce themselves as they break down. So when these plastics are ingested by wildlife, so are those toxins. And as you move through the food chain, the toxins can accumulate at higher and higher levels that can be dangerous for animals. All of these impacts on individual animals can lead to population level impacts, which affects the biodiversity of our ecosystems and the ecosystems as a whole. You've probably heard quite a bit about sea turtles and the threats they face from plastic pollution, which is especially concerning because of the endangered status of most species of sea turtles. Here in Texas, we're also especially worried about birds. Over 650 species of birds spend at least part of their life cycle in Texas, and 98% of North America's long distance migratory birds use Texas as a rest stop on their migration or as wintering grounds. It's important to keep this bird habitat clear of trash, especially plastic, since birds are susceptible to becoming tangled in or ingesting trash. These issues affect us humans as well, not only because we love and want to protect our local wildlife and ecosystems, but because we are also part of the ecosystems ourselves. If our seafood contains microscopic plastics and toxins, humans are at risk of consuming these plastics and toxins too. Our local ecosystems also provide many ecosystem services, so if they're thrown out of whack by a loss of biodiversity from the effects of pollution, we feel that impact too. All right, so a lot of that information was kind of depressing, but don't despair. We can fix this problem by reducing the amount of waste that enters the environment in the first place and removing the waste that's already there. On the waste reduction front, there are a few strategies. We can work to innovate and develop alternative sustainable materials that can replace plastic. We can urge the public to replace their consumption of single-use disposable items such as plastic bottles and plastic grocery bags with reusable alternatives. We can also recycle all of the materials that we can and improve our recycling systems to ensure that materials are actually recycled instead of being sent to a landfill or potentially ending up in the environment. Finally, we can advocate for policies, regulations, and management programs that will have a more systemic impact on production and consumption of single-use items, as well as how we manage the waste that we do produce. To remove trash from the environment, we can do cleanups on beaches and bayous, in parks, and wherever else you find trash that might make its way into our waterways, which is pretty much everywhere. Educating students about marine debris and trash pollution, the effect on the environment, and the ways they can help is also critical, since they can become a part of these solutions now and as they grow older. A great way to teach them about these solutions is by taking them out on a cleanup so they can experience the problem for themselves firsthand. So if you're interested in combining classroom learning about trash and marine debris with a hands-on activity, a beach cleanup is a great activity to get students outside and show them how much trash there is and how we actually gather information about it. You can recreate the trash transects that we use at beach cleanups to collect data, which allows us to gain a better understanding of what kinds of trash are found most commonly in that location. And by combining and comparing data across other sites, we can learn more about our region as a whole. So if you want to do this with your class, you'll need to get some materials together. For materials, you'll need gloves, trash bags or buckets, 2 cones or some other kind of marker, a measuring tape or some method to measure out your transect, a scale or something to weigh your trash that you collect, a smartphone, and some data sheets. You can use the data sheets that we use, and if you contact us, we can provide those to you. To set up the activity, you'll need to pick a site. If you have a beach, bayou, or other water body nearby, that's perfect. If not, you can always try doing this activity in a park or on your campus. Or if there isn't enough trash around for a cleanup, you can also have the students do a trash inventory at home and bring in various items for a mock cleanup. Whatever site you do choose, you'll need to go out there and measure your transect. Now, we typically do a 100-foot transect, but if you need to adjust for your site, that's okay. You can do a 50-foot transect, a 10-foot transect, just as long as you measure it and record the distance of your transect, we can use that data and compare across different sites. So to set up your transect, mark where you start with a marker or a cone or whatever else you have, and then measure out the distance and put a marker at the point where you end your transect. You'll also want to use your smartphone to mark the approximate GPS points of the start and end points of your transect where you put those markers. You can do this on Google Maps on your phone, or there's also some apps you can download onto a smartphone to mark those GPS points. So once you've done that, your transect is set up and ready to go. Now it's time for the trash collection. So have your students go along the transect and pick up every piece of trash they can find, making sure to stay within the boundaries of those transect markers. Typically, we set up our transects parallel to the shoreline or the bayou or whatever other water body we're working along, which means you can cover the entire stretch of beach or habitat that's perpendicular to the shoreline and the transect while searching for trash. This part can be difficult, especially when you're looking for every piece of trash and there's a lot of small fragments of trash, but ask the students to do the best they can to get every single little piece. This part of the activity can be fun and doable by all age groups. If you have students with limited mobility, consider picking an area for your transect with easier terrain, something better maybe than soft sand. You can also equip them with trash grabbers, which can make picking up trash a little bit easier. Next, it's time for data collection. So depending on the size of your group, you could split into multiple smaller groups for this process with one data recorder and multiple trash sorters for every group, or you could just do this all together. The sorters will go through each piece of trash they just collected and say out loud the number they found and what category it falls under. So something like 2 plastic bottles or 5 styrofoam fragments. The data recorder will record this information on the data sheet using tallies. As the students sort the trash, have another trash bag nearby to make sure that you keep all of the trash that you're sorting so that it can be weighed and then thrown away properly afterwards. After they've finished sorting, the students can fill out the rest of the data sheet, which includes some environmental information like tides and weather and wind speed, which can be looked up online for your location. Once you've finished your data collection, you can use any remaining time you might have to pick up trash that's outside the area of the transect to make sure as much trash as possible is removed from the area. After you've finished your beach cleanup activity, you can use that data to start a discussion with your students. What items and materials were most common? And based on this data, what better understanding do we have about how we might be able to tackle this challenge? Are there specific items that we need to really focus on, or do we need to look at trash pollution generally for all the different types of items that we find? Also, depending on the grade level of the students, you could work in some lessons on data analysis. So you could find mean, median, mode, you could make bar graphs, you could return to the same site multiple times and collect multiple data sets and then compare those across time. Or you could visit multiple locations and compare different locations and how the trash you find at these different locations is different. For other related projects, students can research what materials are and are not recyclable in their area and write a report on how they plan to reduce their waste. They could also write a plan on how to reduce waste based on what items they find most commonly in their transect, or even write a letter to a local business or representative asking them to take action on the issue of trash pollution. We hope that this has given you some ideas on how you can incorporate these splash lessons into your curriculum. If you have any questions about the information, the activity, or how you can adapt these activities to your class's specific needs or learning goals, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. We are also happy to come to your class or have your class join us in the field for a cleanup so that we can facilitate these activities for you. If you're interested in learning more about Splash or any of the programs that we run, you can visit us at www.splashtx.org and follow us on social media. We hope to hear from you soon, and don't forget, make a splash and pick up trash.